Do we really know who's in our prisons? No. And that's something that every voter, citizen, and taxpayer should know. In a lecture by Alexander Hernandez on April 14th, we talked about who really is in our prisons. And here's what he said. It's mostly local and states inmates, mostly men, mostly people of color, and that there's a statistic that says people of color are proven to stay in prisons 20% longer than people not of color, and mostly poor people. If we think about this, it might be kind of hard to wrap our minds around, especially the part where it says mostly poor people. If I'm a very wealthy, rich person, maybe even a celebrity or well-known person, it's going to be way easier for me to accept bail and get out of prison. But for the majority of people in prison, even if their crime wasn't that crazy, they might not be able to accept that bail. This is something that I've had to come to realize through this class is I've never sat down and actually asked the questions, who's in prison? I don't personally know anybody in prison or have any family members in prison, so this isn't something that my family often talks about. And one of the saddest part is that most people who die in US jails are unconvicted, which is really hard to accept. And again, that goes back to, are the poor people able to accept bail? And is there biases in the judicial system? As a taxpayer whose money is going to prisons, we should know what's going on and what our money is being put to use for. Well, the thing about it is, it's really not being put to use. The website Crom posts an article that's titled, What It's Like to Swelter Inside Unair Conditioned. That's right, unair conditioned. 70% of prisons lack air conditioning, and the temperatures can reach 149 degrees Fahrenheit. In fact, there's 41 inmate deaths since the 2000s that is linked to heat-related issues. And the unfortunate thing about it is Texas is the hottest and most populous prison system. And as we know, as I know, it gets pretty hot in here. In fact, there's a $33 billion budget surplus that has been proposed to get prisons to have air conditioning, and it's been repeatedly turned down by legislation. Now, let's talk about the impacts on the people. So, inmates suffer from heat strokes and dehydration. There's chronic illnesses like heart disease makes those people way more vulnerable. And staff of these prisons are also affected. There is a group called Texas Prison Community Advocates, and they're launching an awareness campaign to make people aware of what's truly going on in the prisons. There are some partial solutions like cooling beds and water and ice, but those things are inconsistent and insufficient. In another lecture by Alexander Hernandez, on February 17th, we talk about this nail being in the wall, and instead of removing the nail, we put a Band-Aid over it. And that is a perfect example of simply not removing the nail, of just getting AC and putting a Band-Aid over the already consistent issue. A TED Talk by Laura Ronver titled What Happens to People in Solitary Confinement talks about the truth behind confinement. In solitary confinement, you are in a cell by yourself 23 hours a day and only allowed to come out maybe for an exercise or for meals. And most meals, they slip under your door. Here in America, we believe in no cruel or unusual punishment, but solitary confinement is cruel and unusual punishment. It's just easy to put a Band-Aid over that. It's easy to say we're not abusing them or hurting them physically, but I know for myself, if I'm in a room by myself for about 4 hours, I'm ready to get out. I'm freaking out, and imagine being forced to be in a room, and maybe you've committed a crime, and there's a lot of bad stuff going on in your brain. That seems like a pretty big challenge and like literal torture. There's been studies that show people's eyesight becomes worsened because they're not like looking over long distances, and they start to lose identity of self. Because what makes our identity is the way we interact with others, who we hang out with, and how I act around them. If more people knew about these issues in the prison systems in society and were educated on this, I think we would see a lot of differences. Number one, I think a lot of money would go towards things that actually help prisoners, like education. It is scientifically proven that education benefits prisoners' lives, giving them a sense of purpose and a sense of help, two things that every human needs. We talk about this in a lecture with Alexander Hernandez on April 14th. The Berkeley Political Review put out an article titled, What Can We Learn from Norwegian Prison Systems? A lot of Swedish countries have great prison systems They have a low incarnation rate, 75 per 100,000, while in the US it's 707, and in France 114. They have a thing called reduction recidivism, meaning they have a real rehabilitation focus, increased investment, enhanced facilities, and they have rights to vote. They also have classes about skill development, so they can be training like in mechanics and in cooking, so when they do get out of prison, they are ready and acclimated to be back in the real world. It also has a positive staff impact. There's better guard-inmate relationships and better outcomes for both. The prisoner is better acclimated when they get out of society, and the guard might actually enjoy going to work. In a lecture by Alexander Hernandez on April 16th, we talk about how the U.S. represents 40% of the world's life-sentence prison population. That's 1 in 6 individuals in prison serving a life sentence. There's a practice called prison gerrymandering, which is the practice of counting incarcerated individuals as residents of districts, whether they're imprisoned and rather they're in their home district, which changes the electoral district boundaries. It's a problem because it presents a distorted snapshot of the general population and misrepresents incarnated people, which doesn't. If people knew these things, I think there'd be a lot more riots and there would be things that actually led to change. But the problem is we don't educate ourselves, and the government from which we serve doesn't educate. Like I said earlier, the groups that would benefit from the discussion of powers of prosecutors in our society is underrepresented communities like Black and Latino communities in the prison. By Alexander Hernandez on 414, we talk about the issue with prosecutors in the prison system. And here's some statistics. 95% of elected-led prosecutors are white. 88% of the local prosecutors are white. 74% of the local judges are white. 80% of the state Supreme Court justices are white. And 19% states of color on their highest court have no justices. That shows you a lot. In fact, America is the only country in the world in which many prosecutors are elected. And originally, this was supposed to be a good idea so the judges didn't have bias. But really, like many problems, it just produces more bias. These prosecutors want people to go to court because they'll get more money. And the prosecutors are the one who accept the plea or as voters and citizens, we choose to increase mass. The solution to this is to stop prosecutorial elections and punish prosecutorial misconduct. Instead, because these prosecutors have power, if there is a bias or if they are trying to get someone to give them more money or whatever, there's no way for them to be punished because they know people. So it's this idea of like, there's a punishment system to prosecutorial misconduct and not a leaved pay. The media has warped our sense of reality when it comes to prison life by making prison seem like the place, where all the bad men go and there's tough and scary men and everybody's gonna hurt you. Is everybody gonna hurt you in prison, or have we hurt the prison system? In a lecture by Alexander Hernandez on April 10th, he says, if it bleeds, it leads. So if I have a lot of money and I commit a massive financial fraud, stealing billions of dollars from taxpayers' homes, that doesn't seem as interesting as someone that was murdered on the street or someone that robbed a bank because they were trying to get baby formula or that broke into a grocery store to feed their sick mom. Like, we don't know the whys of these things, but those things are what gets the public attention. And I think the government and society does that for a specific way. So our attention is off the people of power. The last thing that I want to talk about is the prison nursing homes. In an article by the website Why It Really Matters, it says America's prison system is turning into de facto nursing homes. There's this aging prison systems, and that comes with healthcare challenges, and older inmates are naturally going to have more healthcare risks. And in prison, there's a 59-year-old morbidity rate compared to that of a 75-year-old general population. So that means older people are dying in prison. Ethic concerns with this, like are people that are elderly no longer threats to society, and the prison system is ill-equipped to handling older people. Like, it's not built for that. But there's so many. In my interviews, I was able to talk to Ryan and Riley, and I just started asking them some of the solutions they thought they had. And that was just, again, like most things in this class, is to educate the population. Both Ryan and Riley think they should know where their money's going since they're paying for it, and they want to know what's going on in the prison system. And that's something that they're both going to educate themselves on. Also understanding when it comes to voting for prosecutors in their community, maybe voting for people that can represent the Black and Latino community better. Overall, the question is, are these prison systems hurting us, or are we hurting the prison systems? Thanks, and Gig'em.